If you like audiobooks or audio shows, check out a free trial of Audible. Just click the link in the description.
Welcome to Mindshock True Crime. This is your host, Bruce Maguire, and today we are finally tackling one of the most mysterious disappearances in modern history, that of Brandon Swanson. Now, Brandon Lawson gets a lot of attention, but this other Brandon Swanson, even though his disappearance is possibly much more baffling, doesn't get quite the same media attention. Of course, if you haven't checked out the Brandon Lawson podcast on Mindshock, we have a series on that case as well. Check that out. But here we're taking a look at Brandon Swanson. This is also one of the most requested cases on Mindshock. Some people believe there's a paranormal or supernatural element due to the nature of his vanishing. And again, this is Mindshock, where we go down every avenue and every theory, but let's exhaust the more conventional theories and avenues first, so to speak. In typical Mindshock fashion, with logic and reason at the forefront. If you want to help support Mindshock, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Help us get more Mindshocking content out there and keep up awareness in missing persons cases and unsolved cold cases. That's what gets them solved. Awareness. A like and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Support the channel that way. Get access to exclusive streams and chats. And, of course, make sure you're subscribed to the channel to get the latest updates. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. So let's jump right in here. Let's do the initial breakdown before we get into more details here. The disappearance of Brandon Swanson. Right from the wiki. Shortly after midnight, May 14th, 2008, Brandon Swanson of Marshall, Minnesota, drove his car into a ditch on his way home from celebrating the end of spring semester with fellow students from Minnesota West Community and Technical College's Canby campus. Uninjured, he got out, called his parents on his cell phone. Unsure of his exact location, he told them he believed he was near Lind, and they drove out to pick him up. They were unable to locate him. Swanson remained on the phone with them until he went silent 47 minutes later, exclaiming, "Oh, expletive." He has not been seen or heard from since. So this was May 14th, 2008. In Porter, Minnesota. So, 2008, relatively modern times, so we will be examining all available information pertaining to the cell phone data and otherwise. Continuing onward here, in the morning, his parents reported Swanson missing to police, who advised them to wait, as such behavior was not uncommon for young men his age. Really? Being on the phone with your parents, yelling out in an expletive, and then the phone going dead or whatever, and then disappearing and never leaving a trace, that's not uncommon? Wow, talk about bumbling. I mean, wow, this is one of the cases where I'm not sure police corruption is appropriate to ascribe here, but police incompetence? Perhaps. It's not like he just didn't come home and he was at a party. I mean, you can maybe make the case. Of course, this is a case-by-case basis. I mean, certain kids, regardless of age, they would never do that unless something happened to them. And then other kids, of course, if they have a history of doing that, they might do that if they're party animals, whatever. But in this case, he's on the phone with them and then he disappears. I mean, that's not common at all. I mean, how often does that happen? Later that day, the circumstances of his disappearance became more complicated when his cell phone records showed he had been near Porter, 25 miles from where Swanson had said he was, in a different direction. That information led to the discovery of his car near Taunton. It is not known whether Swanson was aware of the discrepancy when he talked to his parents. Foul play has not been ruled out, but it also has been proposed that he might have accidentally fallen into the Yellow Medicine River near where his car was found and drowned, although extensive searches have not found a body. Land searches with dogs have continued in the area for several years. His parents successfully lobbied the state legislature to pass Brandon's law, which requires the police begin investigations of missing adults promptly. And he was 19 years old here, so again, I mean, it's rough. I mean, this is a teenager. This is with the critical detail here. He's on the phone with his parents. It's not like he just went to a party, got drunk, and, crashed at a friend's place. So, yeah, this is a unique situation, no doubt. Background here, a native of Marshall, the seat of Lyon County in southwestern Minnesota, Swanson graduated from Marshall High School in 2007. He then chose to study wind turbines for a year at the Minnesota West Community and Technical College campus in Canby. Classes at Minnesota West ended for the academic year on May 13th, 2008. Swanson stayed in Canby for the evening to celebrate with friends. At two different parties, he was observed to consume some alcoholic beverages, but his friends said not enough to make him seem visibly intoxicated. Okay, now what can we garner from these statements from the friends? So, if his friends were responsible for his death, now again, males that are met with foul play, the statistics there's more of a chance they could have been met with foul play at the hands of a stranger as opposed to a female. Females are usually abducted, harmed, killed, disposed of by people known to them, usually the significant other, or friends, or acquaintances, or coworkers, someone known to them. Whereas with males, the statistics are more skewed, where it's more plausible that a stranger could have harmed a male. So, but if his friends were responsible, wouldn't they say he was drunk? I mean, because then he could have just stumbled somewhere. Why would they say he wasn't? So unless, if they were really his friends and they're telling the truth and he didn't appear to be intoxicated, then they would say as such. So this definitely does not make anyone lean suspiciously in the direction of the friends by this statement. Disappearance. Also, we have to figure out what his parents said when he was on the phone, whether or not he sounded drunk or not. Disappearance. Swanson left Canby for the 30-mile drive home before midnight. Just before 2 a.m., he called his parents on his cell phone, telling them he had driven his Chevrolet Lumina off the road and into a ditch from which he could not remove the car. He was not hurt and asked them to come to where he was and pick him up. Annette and Brian Swanson got in their pickup truck and drove out to where they thought he was, keeping him on the phone despite occasional hang-ups and drops. Brandon stayed with his car and tried to signal to them by flashing his lights on and off, but they saw nothing, nor did he see them do the same. Brandon finally gave up and told them he was leaving the car to walk towards lights he could see that led him to believe he was near Lind, a small town roughly 7 miles southwest of Marshall. He told his father to head for the parking lot of a local bar and wait for him there. Brian began driving there, talking to his son as he did. Shortly after 2:30 a.m., 47 minutes into the call, Brandon suddenly interrupted himself on the phone and said, "Oh, expletive." He was silent for the remainder of the call until his parents hung up and attempted to call back. Brandon has not been seen or heard from since. Okay, so the phone call apparently did not terminate when he uttered that statement, possibly being attacked or whatever happened. So, some people believe he fell into the river. If so, if the phone fell into the river, would it not terminate? Would it continue being connected? Would it not fry? So, I mean, that's interesting there. But if somebody hit him, if somebody didn't see him and hit him with the car, what would they do then if they were so panicked? Like, let's say this is not a serial killer, an experienced criminal. Let's say this is just a panicked individual, possibly drunk themselves. They hit him. Are they going to dispose of the body? In which case, they take the body and they don't hang up the call. I mean, we're gonna examine that theory and others in a moment. I just wanted to add that there because that's the first thought I had there. We have to make it clear. Apparently, the call did not terminate at that moment. His parents hung up and tried to call again. Investigation at 6:30 a.m. His parents reported Brandon missing to the Lind police. They were told at first that it was hardly unusual for young men that age to stay out all night after the last day of college classes. I mean, again, yes, if they're not on the phone with him specifically trying to pick him up. I mean, this is just insanity. Annette Swanson specifically recalled that one of the officers said it was Brandon's right to be missing. Later that morning, the Lind police did start a search but found no trace of Brandon in the town or outside. They requested that the office of Lyon County Sheriff Joe Dahl assist them. To better focus the search, the sheriff's office obtained Brandon's cell phone records, which revealed that Brandon had been calling from the vicinity of Taunton along State Highway 68, the main route to Canby, northwest of Marshall, 25 miles from Lind. Okay, I have to interject again here. What verification is there? I mean, is it possible there was a glitch in terms of the cell phone tracking? I mean, again, we'll take a look at it to see if they can trace the towers, like, let's say, the past 24 hours of the cell phone activity and if it's relatively accurate. But, I mean, this is 2008. Is it not beyond the realm of possibility that there might be some glitch that told them that the cell phone was at a location that it wasn't actually at? I mean, nothing's perfect. I mean, look at 2022 with all the advancements of computers, etc. There's still crashes and glitches. I just want to know, was it just checked like one time, or did they go back and verify all of those pings with a dedicated advanced level team instead of the normal, oh, the cell phone company said it pinged here, boom, they report it to the police, that's it, nobody questions it or verifies it in any kind of thorough investigation of the technical data. So, again, I think that should definitely, because in a certain percentage of cases, all these missing persons cases or whatever, how many pings would cause erroneous or glitchy data? In all of the history of cell phones, I mean, there's obviously going to be a couple, probably a lot more than a couple. Now, I'm not saying that happened in this case. I'm saying if it happened in this case, that might be a clue there. But let's continue. And then, of course, we do the car in the ditch that does match his story. Now, is it possible that the criminals were just, I mean, would they really get his car out of a ditch and put it in another ditch somewhere else? I mean, I don't know. That seems, I don't know how often criminals would do that. But let's continue here. Searching in that area, deputies discovered Brandon's abandoned car in a ditch off a gravel road along the Lincoln County line a mile north of Highway 68, bringing the office of that county sheriff, Jack Vizecki, into the investigation as well. He told the media that the Lumina had gotten hung up on the top of an incline at the edge of the road, not seriously enough to damage the car, but enough to keep the wheels from touching the ground on that side. There was nothing else found amiss with the car, and due to the grass and gravel in the area surrounding it, there were no tracks and thus no way to tell what direction Brandon might have started walking. Okay, so based on the forensics of the car here, it seems probable that it was not restaged it was not restaged. I mean, I don't know, because if they see that there was no other damage, and they can tell that it didn't also go into another ditch elsewhere, I mean, again, going down every single possible theory, I can't put a lot of credence into the theory that the car was restaged. But again, we have to examine every possibility. His cell phone call has been routed through a tower at the intersection of County Routes 3 and 10 near Minnesota, another town along Highway 68. By May 15th, the call had been determined to have come from within 5 miles of the tower. Searchers were concentrating their efforts there. Since part of that circle included Yellow Medicine County to the north, authorities from that jurisdiction also took part. Dahl noted that from the area, a red light atop a Taunton grain elevator could be seen. He thought that it was possible that the red light Brandon had seen had led him to believe that Lind was within walking distance. Ground searches were being complemented with a flyover by an aerial team. Search dogs were also brought in from the Twin Cities. A team of bloodhounds from the nearby Codington County, South Dakota, picked up a 3-mile scent trail that largely followed the fields west-northwest to an abandoned farm, then along the Yellow Medicine River to a point where it appeared to enter the stream. Okay, so this is clearly stating that there is a dog track going directly into the stream. Brandon had mentioned passing fences and hearing nearby water, his father recalled. On the theory that Brandon might have drowned, boats from the state's Department of Natural Resources were deployed along the river and gates were installed. In some areas at Lincoln County, the water had been 10 feet deep on the morning of the disappearance, but had gone down since then, Dahl noted. Deputies also walked the river's banks, and horses and all-terrain vehicles were deployed in the surrounding area. However, Dahl ruled out a more organized, extensive ground search. I mean, what are the logistics here? Like, again, just based on basic physics and the current of the stream. I mean, there's obviously only a certain distance a body could have gotten. I mean, this isn't rocket science. I mean, that particular stream has certain particular currents. You can add a margin of error, and you could really find how far the body could have been carried. So apparently there were gates installed, extensive searches here. Now, Dahl ruled out an extensive ground search. So it looks like they did an extensive search of the river, but just not in all the surrounding areas on the ground. Later searches, or at that time, let's see what the follow-up here is. Later searches after the original search found no sign of Swanson, most efforts were discontinued. Sheriff Vizaki continued to walk the 2 miles of the Yellow Medicine in that area every day for 30 days. Okay, so is anybody really going to claim police corruption here when the sheriff himself, again, if this is verified, he walked that 2 miles every day for 30 days. I mean, this sounds like a guy who wants to figure out what's going on. The Swansons left their porch light on all night, every night, as a symbol of their hope that Brandon would eventually return or be found, and still do. Searches resumed late that fall after fields planted shortly after the disappearance had been harvested. Dogs on those searches continued to follow scents of human remains into an area northwest of Porter that had not been searched earlier. Efforts picked up again in the spring after snow melted, but before planting, a cycle that continued through 2011. By that time, 122 square miles had been searched. I mean, how plausible is it that he made it outside of that search area? Unless, again, there was a hit and run and disposal of the body. Or somehow being met with foul play at the hands of another individual, either in a vehicle or not. In 2010, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension took over as lead agency. It set up a tip line. By 2015, 90 leads had been reported that way. By that point, when official searches resumed, the area of interest had moved towards Mud Creek, a tributary of the Yellow Medicine north and northwest of Porter. Okay, alright. So is it possible he fell into the river, which is about 10 feet or so. He got carried a certain percentage of the way and then exited the river and then walked another distance and then possibly fell and drowned in another portion. That's why the dog track was lost at the initial point where he fell into the river, but he didn't die there because he would have been found there. So is it possible he somehow made it out elsewhere, continued walking, and then possibly fell in another area? Just by all the information here, it seems like they thought that might have been a possibility. Theories. While the trail followed by one of the dogs went to the Yellow Medicine... Okay, so it was only one of the dogs? The other dogs did not track him there? Okay, if that's the case... Because, I mean, dogs are not infallible. I mean, they're really good, but they're not infallible. You do want verification. You do want multiple dogs to be able to follow the same track just for verification. So if this is true and only one dog had this track, that's tough. That's tough to put 100% faith into. Despite her son's last known words, Annette Swanson does not think he drowned there. After following the scent to the water, that dog continued up across the other side and along that riverbank to another gravel road where it continued north towards the Yellow Medicine County line and ended. Okay, now why didn't they mention that detail earlier? I mean, this write-up is kind of weird. There really is nothing to indicate that he's in the river, she told CNN. Brandon Swanson also recalls that any alcohol his son had consumed earlier in the evening notwithstanding, he did not seem disoriented or confused during their phone conversations. Okay, so he does not appear drunk on the phone. Interesting. If Swanson is still alive, there are other possibilities, although they appear remote. He could have intentionally disappeared, but his parents do not believe he would have done that. Vizecki said he could not rule out foul play, even though there was no evidence of it. Someone could have been in the shadows, and they got him that way, he speculated. Interesting. So Vizecki, not only did he say that he couldn't rule out foul play, even though there was no evidence, he went further and quoted someone could have been in the shadows and they got him that way. So he went a step further and even postulated a scenario where there could have been a foul play instead of just leaving it at that. That there was no evidence of it, but he couldn't rule it out. I mean, going further, I mean, is that what he really believes then, just because he went that step further with that comment? Brandon's Law. After the searches, Annette Swanson was still struck by the initial response of the Lind police that her son had a right to be missing when she told them how old he was. I'm his mother, and I knew something was horribly wrong, she recalled later. And again, mother's intuition. A lot of people don't put stock in that. And obviously, it's not 100% accurate, just like a tracking dog. People put stock in tracking dogs, but they don't have a 100% accuracy. Same thing with mother's intuition. There could be some confused signals there, but I would say in most cases, mother's intuition is pretty accurate. Not necessarily that they would know exact details of anything, just a general intuition or a general sense. She and Brian began lobbying for changes in state law that would require an investigation into the case of a missing adult to begin as soon as it is reported, much as was already required in cases of possibly abducted children. Annette met with Marty Seifert, minority leader of the state House of Reps at the time, whose district included Marshall, in a local restaurant. The two talked about the problems that she had experienced with police when she reported her son missing. She knew it wouldn't help in her son's case, but that it could help others in the future, Seifert recalled in 2015. Seifert introduced a bill called Brandon's Law that would make the required change by amending the laws governing the state's existing missing child program to change the word child to person. He recalled considerable resistance at first. I mean, at least up to the age of what, like 25-ish, or at least 21. I mean, you could, because again, I mean, college-age students, I mean, they're not exactly the most logical, responsible people. I mean, sure, some of them might be, but most of them are not, especially with all the drugs and partying in a large percentage of that college-age population. I mean, again, I could understand why they might not necessarily want to do that for like a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old. But up to 21 or even 25, I mean, that just seems common sense. He recalled considerable resistance at first from this state's law enforcement community as it was developed in committee. Part of it had to do with privacy, especially regarding cell phones, he told the Marshall Independent. Technology was emerging then, so then there were discussions about privacy and when they can ping you and when can't they. Dennis Frederickson introduced a companion bill in the state Senate. After it passed both houses, the House unanimously in May 2009, Governor Tim Pawlenty signed it into law, with the Swansons and their daughter Jameen in attendance at the ceremony. The effect of the change also required that police, in addition to determining in their preliminary investigation if the reported person is indeed missing, determine whether the person is potentially in dangerous circumstances. They must, like, broken down in a car or walking along a road. They must also notify other nearby law enforcement agencies promptly. Brandon's Law also clarifies that the agency taking the report is the lead agency investigating the case. The absence of that distinction had created some problems in the later phases of the initial search when 3 different counties were involved. Police were no longer allowed to refuse a report based on initial belief that no criminal activity was involved. The brevity of the interval since the person was last seen, the possibility that the person may have intentionally disappeared, or the lack of a relationship between the missing person and the reporter. Following the Gov's signature, the law took effect at the beginning of July 2009. 4 other states have passed similar laws. Seifert left the legislature in 2010, but he still has the pen Pawlenty used to sign the bill into law. I consider it one of the most important bills I authored in my 14 years. It will save lives. And nothing prevents common sense police officers from taking a report seriously and investigating it in the first place, even if there was no law against that. Okay. So let's get more into specific details here. So Grunge.com, of all places, has an interesting write-up here. The biggest Brandon Swanson theories, What Really Happened, by Jennifer Dushman. October 22nd, 2021 was the date of this article. On May 13, 2008, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson completed his first year at Minnesota West Community and Technical College. Later that same evening, he and his friends were celebrating at a home in Canby, where they were also having a send-off party for one of their classmates. According to witness reports, there was alcohol at the party, and Swanson had at least one shot of whiskey. However, as reported by the True Crime Files, Swanson's friends said he did not appear to be intoxicated when he left the party just after midnight, May 14th. Swanson reportedly planned to drive from Canby to his parents' home in Marshall. The drive would have taken around 30 minutes. At approximately 1:15 a.m., Swanson's vehicle got stuck in a ditch. The True Crime Files reports he initially attempted to call his friends for help. However, nobody answered his calls. At approximately 1:54 a.m., Swanson called his parents and told them his car was stuck in a ditch off a gravel road. However, he was not entirely certain of his location. During the call, Swanson assured his parents he was not hurt and that he would wait with his car. However, when Brian and Annette Swanson arrived at their son's expected location, they could not see him or his vehicle. As reported by True Crime Files, Brandon and his parents agreed to flash headlights in an attempt to find each other. Unfortunately, they still could not see each other. Brandon Swanson was on the phone with his father when he vanished without a trace. Brandon Swanson said he could see lights in the distance, which he believed were coming from the town of Lind. He told his parents he would walk the rest of the way and meet them in a parking lot of a Lind tavern. Brian said he stayed on the phone with his son while he was walking. As reported by True Crime Files, Swanson planned to take a shortcut through some fields as opposed to staying on the main road. During the call, he told his father he passed several fences and gravel roads. He could also hear water running in the distance. Brian said he and his son talked for approximately 47 minutes before Brandon exclaimed, "Oh, expletive," and the call was abruptly dropped. Brian said there was nothing after that. Brian believes his son may have slipped and fallen. Another point here, some people believe like he could have maybe been shot by somebody for trespassing and they covered it up. But apparently, how would that gunshot not be heard? You would think it would be heard unless it happened at a moment, because it said that they were dropped. The service was not excellent here. So there were dropped calls and stuff, so they had to call each other back prior to that, though. But this is a 47-minute call. I mean, some calls have dead spots. It would be curious to know if this call... I mean, everybody's been on the phone where, I mean, sometimes you have up to 5 to 10 seconds of just dead air and you can't hear the other person. So unless a gunshot or some kind of scuffle occurred at that time, it seems like his father would have heard something. The other thing I want to point out here is that, so this is a guy talking on his phone, so if there was some kind of criminal-minded individual out there looking to kill somebody, they would have heard him from a pretty decent distance if he's talking on the phone while walking. So that would bring attention to him, that otherwise just a random person walking in the middle of the night through fields might not necessarily be heard from someone from a distance if they're not talking and just walking normally. Depending, of course, on how crunchy the ground is or whatever. Either way, talking on a phone, particularly if you're in an agitated state and the connection is bad, maybe he's talking a little louder than normal, but either way, someone would be able to hear him at a certain distance that otherwise they might not. I think that's an important point to keep in mind. Brian and Annette attempted to call their son back numerous times. However, their calls were never answered. By the following morning, the calls were going directly to voicemail. The True Crime Files reports Brian and Annette continued driving around looking for their son, but they did not find any signs of him or his car. At 6:30 a.m., they called authorities to file a missing persons report. However, authorities said to wait, as it is not unusual for men his age to go missing without contacting their parents. I mean, a 19-year-old, are you going to call a 19-year-old a man? I mean, maybe a young man. I mean, a 19-year-old's a kid. Brandon Swanson's vehicle was located, but he was never found. Later that same morning, a review of Swanson's cell phone records revealed he was just outside Porter, Minnesota, while he was talking to his parents. The town he saw in the distance could not have been Lind, as he was 25 miles away from where he thought he was. True Crime Files reports he was walking along Highway 68 between Canby, where he attended the party, and Marshall, where his parents lived. Okay, I just had another thought here, too. Is it possible something traumatic happened at the party? Not necessarily that the friends were involved in disposing of him, although who knows, because how would they have found him? But if something happened, he could have been in a certain state of mind. I mean, you would think his parents would have picked up on that, but maybe not, because what state of would he normally be confused about where he was if he's from this area? I mean, I don't know. Like, obviously, if somebody's distressed or drunk, I mean, or was he really just that drunk, but he's able to cover it up in conversation? I mean, I don't know. Would a 19-year-old be able to do that? I mean, someone older, obviously, with experience doing that for many years. I mean, there are people that can do that. Would a 19-year-old kid be able to do that? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of questions here. But if he was in some kind of state of mind, he had to have been in order to not know where he was, unless of course he's faking this as his disappearance. But if the friends were involved in helping him fake his disappearance, would they say he wasn't drunk? I mean, I don't know what to make of that either, but True Crime Files reports he was walking along Highway 68 between Canby, where he attended the party, and Marshall, where his parents lived. Authorities began their official search for Swanson shortly before noon. At approximately 12:30 p.m., his Chevrolet Lumina was found in a ditch on the borders of Lincoln and Yellow Madison, just over a mile from Taunton. Lincoln County Sheriff Jack Vizecki said the vehicle was positioned in a way that Swanson would not be able to get any traction to get out of the ditch. However, as reported by the True Crime Files, there was no visible damage to the vehicle and no signs that Swanson was injured in the incident. In the months following his disappearance, law enforcement personnel and volunteers searched the region on horseback, on foot, and using all-terrain vehicles. They also utilized search dogs and scoured several bodies of water. Unfortunately, no trace of the missing man was ever found. As reported by the True Crime Files, the search dogs led their handlers to the edge of Yellow Medicine River, which caused authorities to conclude that Swanson likely fell in the river. But I mean, the other source was saying that the dog picked up the scent again on the other side and continued elsewhere, and disappeared not in a body of water. Authorities believe Brandon Swanson fell into a river. I mean, did they really, though? As the river was searched and Brandon Swanson's body was never found, the authorities believe he made it back out of the water and continued walking. However, he likely died of hypothermia, as the temperature was just 40 degrees that morning. They do not believe foul play was involved. The True Crime Files reports the search dogs also indicated that there were human remains near Mud Creek north of Porter. However, authorities never actually found any remains. So this is kind of weird. So how thorough of a search did they do? Because without knowing that, like if this was truly an absolutely thorough search, I mean, did they even use ground penetrating radar, whatever? Because if the dogs, I mean, is there more than one dog? It says here, search dogs, plural, indicated that there were human remains. So apparently only one dog picked up the track or led the track into the river and then out. But were multiple dogs hitting on remains near Mud Creek? And they searched it very well and the body wasn't there? So does that mean a body was there and it was there for a certain period of time and then moved? Is it possible he really did die of hypothermia and he fell there, and then someone just took the body and moved it for whatever reason? Either a psychopath, maybe a landowner that didn't want to be sued. I mean, I would think they would have investigated that, but who knows? So someone who wasn't responsible for his death in any way, but simply moved the body for whatever reason. Does that explain the hits with the dogs and yet the body not being there? I mean, this is curious. It's definitely curious. I mean, the temperature does match up with hypothermia, and if we believe that initial dog track, and he did fall into the river, then got out of it, walked a certain portion, because I mean, it seems like they really did do a thorough search of that river. I mean, they installed gates and all that, so yeah, it's hard to believe that they wouldn't have, unless they're all completely incompetent, but Authorities said Swanson could be anywhere within a 122 square mile area. Well, that's weird. Why not 123? 10 years after Swanson vanished, Yellow Medicine County Sheriff Bill Flated said, "It's a huge area. If you take that immediate area where the car was, and then the time frame when he was walking on the phone with his parents, who knows what direction he went and how far he traveled." Volunteer firefighter Darren E. Delzer said he has another theory about what happened to Swanson based on several things he noted about the case. In response to an article by Angelo Marcos, Delzer said Swanson was legally blind in his left eye and always wore glasses. However, on the morning he went missing, he left his glasses inside his car. I mean, this is a really important detail. It's weird how it's not even on the wiki. Delzer also noted that Swanson said, "Not another fence," right before saying, "Oh, expletive." Another interesting detail. Delzer suggested the teen may have fallen into an unmarked cistern or well, which are not uncommon in rural areas. But I mean, come on, how many of those really are there? Because if they match up with the dog track, again, if the dog track is wrong, okay, whatever. But let's assume that the dog track is accurate first. Can they really not search all of the fences and cisterns and wells just in the area of the dog track first? And if they did do that and he's not there, then expand it to other wells and cisterns in the area. I mean, how many could there really be? I mean, even if there are hundreds, I mean, it's been years. Other theories about Brandon Swanson's disappearance. Another theory suggests Brandon Swanson may have orchestrated his own disappearance. As explained by Minnesota's Unsolved Cases, it is possible that the teen left the area on his own and is now living under a new identity. However, it is not likely. As he had attempted to call his friends and was attempting to meet up with his parents, it is far more likely that he wanted to be found. It has also been suggested that Swanson may have had some kind of mental breakdown. However, his parents both said he seemed to be lucid when they spoke with him on the phone, and he did not have any history of mental illness. The theory that he fell into the water and either made it back out or drowned also has been criticized, as his phone seemed to be working after the call with his father was disconnected. Minnesota's Unsolved reports that if the phone were submerged in water, all of the calls would have gone directly to voicemail. Although it is plausible that the phone fell on the ground while Swanson fell in the water, it was never found near any of the bodies of water in the region. Although he may have sought shelter in an abandoned building, most, if not all, of the abandoned buildings in the area were searched, and neither his remains nor his personal belongings were ever found. And then they go on to talk about Brandon's Law, which we already went over. Okay, I have another theory here. I don't know if I'm going to dub this the Maguire theory. I don't know if anybody's ever thought of this, but here's my initial thought right now after reading all of this new information about the that he's blind or legally blind or partially blind in the left eye and doesn't have his glasses. If he did injure himself on a fence and fell or something, possibly enough to knock him unconscious or at least incapacitate him to the point where he couldn't grab the phone or didn't think to grab the phone. Is it possible? Now, again, I'm not saying he was attacked. I mean, that's another theory, because if he was attacked at that point, I mean, you would think there would be something heard. But here's what I'm going to dub the Maguire theory in the Brandon Swanson case. If he injured himself by falling, either in the water, I mean, yeah, the cell phone not being recovered, I mean, that's tough. But whether he fell in the water, then got out or not, or simply fell next to a fence and either hit himself on a rock or whatever, if another party, possibly a criminal-minded party, stumbled upon an injured individual, this could have been an hour later, so the phone is not on now. Or even a half an hour. I mean, they stayed on the phone for however many minutes before hanging up and trying to call again. So, and I'm assuming they continued calling throughout the night, but either way, that phone could have been taken by a criminal-minded individual who also took an injured human being. Perhaps there's a certain population of criminal-minded scumbags. Perhaps they're too cowardly to attack people under normal circumstances. Perhaps there are serial killers more of the scavenger mindset that would only act on their sinister urges on an injured party. So if they find this injured teenager, what would they do? An extension of this theory is perhaps if a good Samaritan stumbled upon him, you would think they would take the phone, call police or whatever. They wouldn't just try to help him. I mean, that's more of an outlier theory because even if they were a good Samaritan who happened to be a criminal and didn't want to have anything to do with police, or maybe some kind of tax evading cheat, a non-violent criminal, would they not contact? I mean, it still seems like they would drop him off at a hospital or something. But so it seems unlikely that they would have had him first and then another evil third party would have got him. But on the basic level of this theory, did he injure himself? And did another individual somehow do something to him after he injured himself, taking the phone with him? Because if Brandon himself was trying to crawl out of there, wouldn't the phone... It seems like the phone should have been recovered at some point through all these searches. Unless he got really, really far outside of the search area, how plausible is that? I mean, I don't know. But that's the Maguire theory I'm outlining here in the Brandon Lawson case. Perhaps he got injured, and only due to that... Or perhaps, was he being tracked? I mean, some serial killers love to operate off of roads, particularly on disabled motorists with disabled vehicles. Did they follow him from the road? So this is 2008. I'm going to drop another Echelon Spy Satellite System reference because this is 2008 and not 1970. Obviously, a lot of these spy agencies, the NSA, all these other agencies, they do have spy satellite systems. Obviously, they work with other agencies and third-party satellite companies, etc. But they clearly monitor pretty much all of the United States. 24/7 surveillance. So, wouldn't they be able to find something now? It was dark, okay, yeah, sure, but they could at least trace him from the party to a certain area, and they could at least zoom out a little bit to maybe track all the vehicles that were in the area. Because if there was another party involved, they might be able to track vehicles and at least rule them out. I'm not alleging that the satellites would be able to monitor activities, under the tree line or whatever. But in terms of vehicles and tracing movements, I mean, it would still be very, very helpful. Also, looking at some of these photos of the searches, I mean, the grass and these fields are really tall. I mean, they're almost as tall as a person. So you could see how he might not be found by a human, but with all the dogs searching, you would think they'd pick it up. And over so many years, I mean, it does seem like it's not unreasonable that they wouldn't have found him immediately, just due to the nature of the terrain. But with this many dogs employed and so many searches over the years, it seems like they should have found him by now. Unless there were private properties that didn't allow searches, I mean, I don't see a record of that anywhere. So, if there was, that'd be curious. I mean, in the Brandon Lawson case, supposedly there was a landowner possibly connected to the sheriff who did not allow his property to be searched, which is nearby, but that doesn't make sense either because supposedly they found remains with the clothes that Brandon was wearing, but there were helicopter flyovers that went over all the properties. So that doesn't make a lot of sense in the Brandon Lawson case. I talk about that on that podcast, so you can check that out if you want more information on that. And they did helicopter flyovers here as well, although that would be less helpful than a desert, because here we have these extensive fields of tall grass, so if he had fallen in the field, he wouldn't necessarily be viewable from helicopter. Other reports state that the Yellow Medicine River is between knee-deep in some areas and 15 feet deep in others. So it didn't really have a uniform depth. So 15 feet area, I mean, obviously that's super dangerous. But if it's only knee-high, if he's not drunk, it seems like he would not have drowned in that situation. Also, from some of these photos, it does look like there are some really big drop-offs in certain areas. I mean, not quite cliffs, but clearly, I mean, 10 to 20 foot drop areas where if you don't, at night and you don't see where you're going, it's just a drop. And I mean, some of it's right into the river, some of it's near the river. But again, supposedly all the areas of the river were searched, so. And especially if he was injured in some kind of fall, how far could he have gotten on his own? Does the Maguire theory come into play where a third party possibly did something to an injured Brandon Swanson? Also, another theory people bring up is that Brandon took shelter in some kind of an outbuilding of a random farmer. Now, people discount this theory because they would think that the farmer would eventually find him in their outbuilding. Now, here's a darker theory. What if some of these farmers, what if one of them had some kind of evil intentions and he did something to Brandon, in which case he would never come forward? So, how thoroughly have all of these farm owners been investigated? Again, there's nothing really to suggest they did anything, but has it been ruled out? I mean, after all these years, we do need to expand and start thinking in more than one direction. Yet another theory, if he did stumble into an outbuilding and died of hypothermia, would a farmer really come forward? Like, let's say they find him already dead. They don't want to be liable. He died on their property. I mean, in an age where burglars are suing homeowners for houses they're burglarizing and winning lawsuits, I mean, is it beyond the realm of possibility that one of these farmers, they just might have just not wanted the trouble and they disposed of the dead body? They found a dead kid in one of their buildings. What would they do? After thinking about that, actually, just now, though, I think I might have to call that the Maguire theory. That seems a little bit more plausible than some random psycho. Although, I mean, I don't know exactly how much more plausible. Obviously, we don't know what happened, so hindsight's, of course, 2020, and the body hasn't been recovered yet, and we don't know what happened to him yet. So, yeah, it's really tough, but I think I might have to call that the Maguire theory instead. That a farmer found Swanson either on their property somewhere or in one of their buildings and just didn't want the headache, and it's as simple as that. Now, on the paranormal side, just for a brief moment, if there's some kind of interdimensional rift and he fell into some kind of interdimensional wormhole and the phone was either left behind or taken with him, the only thing I could see that points to that is if there was absolutely no noise on the phone. Because when you drop a phone, I mean, there could be a rustle from the leaves nearby or whatever, or just the phone bounces a few times, animal noises, I mean, wind noises. Was it completely dead silent? And if so, I mean, was the phone broken at some point? Like, if part of the phone got damaged, that could be a non-paranormal explanation if there was no noise at all. But I don't know if the parents were ever asked if there was any kind of noises. They just said that Brandon wasn't speaking. So, and then the father said that it sounded like he tripped and fell. I don't know what that means. That was his impression, or he specifically heard some kind of a stumble. But then what was heard after that, if anything? Another theory is that he said, "Oh, expletive," because maybe he saw some headlights, so he was gonna run to a car. If he's taking a shortcut, there's a fence, and the road is a little bit of a distance away. Would he yell, "Oh, expletive," as if, "Oh, look, there's a car. I'm gonna go get help," and he rushes after the car, and then he gets hurt, falls, whatever, and he's not able to make it? Or if he did fall into the river at that point, I mean, where's the phone, though? I mean, it's rough. I mean, if they really searched well, you would think they would have searched well where the dogs were. So if the dogs really didn't have his scent, then okay, the phone might still be out there somewhere. But you would think if the dogs really did have his scent, they would have picked up the phone. Now, if Brandon lost the phone and then stumbled into some outbuilding for shelter while he was dying of hypothermia, would the farm owner who possibly disposed of him, he might actually go out and make sure that he didn't drop anything so it wouldn't be found. So if he did find the phone and confiscated it, I mean, that's my new Maguire theory right there. Because out of all the farm owners in the U.S., there's got to be at least one that would do something like that. Now, whether or not that happened in this case, again, I'm not saying that it happened. I'm just saying that's one theory that might explain why he hasn't been found or his phone might not have been found. So other people speculate that he really was drunk and that's why he was taking back roads. Also, he visited at minimum 2 parties. So he might have been more, but I believe the witnesses said he was at 2 different parties. So he's party hopping. And did he really just get confused? Or is he taking back roads to avoid a possible DUI? And that's why he even went off the road into a ditch, because he was drunk. Or maybe on some kind of drugs that wouldn't cause him to slur. if that's the case, and these roads are really poorly lit, so, I mean, definitely curious there, definitely curious. Another interesting detail I found on Reddit, supposedly, there were cadaver dogs that hit 2 to 4 miles from his last position, according to the cell phone data. And the searcher said that the dogs hit on a piece of farm equipment. And it was near one of the fields, but that particular farmer did not give them permission to do anything further. Now, the plausible deniability aspect comes in here because all of these extensive searches might ruin the crops and the farmland. Now, there is a particular time of year where it wouldn't, so it's not clear why wouldn't he give them permission on a part of year, there's at least several weeks a year where they're not actively doing crop work or whatever, that could possibly do a search without too much damage, but it's unclear whether this permission was ever given. And if the dogs really did hit on a piece of farm equipment, what does that mean? Was a piece of farm equipment used to maybe bury the body or something? I mean, that's kind of weird. And this information is about a year old. Some people speculate that the farmer simply shot him, but maybe not. I already went over that. But in the Maguire theory, perhaps he actually went up to a farm owner and talked to him. And then who knows what happened after that. Other people further speculate that perhaps the farmer might have been involved in some kind of illegal activity, drug activity, whatever, and having some kid stumble upon it. Again, nobody's saying these things are likely. I mean, these are definitely unlikely scenarios, but how do we know that this unlikely scenario isn't what happened to Brandon Swanson? That's something that the coincidence theorists really have a hard time with. Nobody's saying it's likely. I mean, we're going over outlier cases. Whatever the likelihoods, tripping and falling and dying, his body would have been found or drowning in the river. That's a likely scenario of somebody that had an accident. Those likely scenarios are the cases that are solved. So the cases that are unsolved, sometimes a certain percentage of them have unlikely outcomes. This isn't rocket science. Another possibility is if this farmer himself was a drug user, he might have thought he was being attacked by some random kid just walking through his field. So if he's high on drugs, he doesn't know what's going on, he accidentally kills him or whatever, he kills him in a drug stupor, then the next day he's like, wow, what have I done? He would clean up his own mess. Someone well-versed in farm equipment apparently said this: plenty of documented cases where individuals have killed and disposed of bodies on their own property. Farmers have heavy equipment too, so he's probably about 20 feet down in soil thanks to a backhoe. Gotta stay on the road, kids. And is this a backhoe that cadaver dogs hit on? The other thing too, if the Maguire theory is true and the farmer just stumbled across the body at whatever point in the morning, did they then just use the backhoe or whatever equipment to bury him deep in the field just, to avoid the mess? I mean, is that more likely than an alien abduction? Would also be curious if the farmer would allow some kind of ground-penetrating radar or a non-disruptive search, because obviously they don't want their crops ruined digging up all the fields and everything. But if they're innocent, would they object to ground-penetrating radar that wouldn't disrupt the field too much? And then, of course, brain fingerprint scanning is something I talk about as well. Obviously, polygraph test, not admissible in court, not that reliable, but brain fingerprint scanning, this is what was used on Stephen Allen Avery of Making a Murderer fame, where there was no, it basically just measures whether or not there's a familiar response in the brain. So the state's case, there was no such response in Stephen Avery's brain, so everything the state said about what happened is not recognized by Avery's brain. So he has no idea what they're talking about. So even if he did kill Teresa Hallback, it's definitely not in the manner that he was convicted of doing. That much is clear. Nobody's fooled the brain fingerprint scan technology. I think there's $100 or $150,000 reward for beating it because it bypasses any intention to deceive. It basically just measures if there's any recognition in brainwave responses to information being presented. This is what's used by the CIA and the upper government agencies in interrogations and such because it is so accurate. I think it was used in at least one court case, but then everything's kind of gone quiet on the brain fingerprint scan side of things. Is that by design? Because a lot of corrupt politicians, corrupt law enforcement, corrupt judges, they don't want it being used against them, so they just want to outlaw it outright. I don't know. But if this farmer consented to a brain fingerprint scan and consented to ground penetrating radar used on his field, then we can rule him out. But if he's opposed to all this, because obviously it's very valid that he doesn't want his crops destroyed, I mean, that's his livelihood. And he might think of it as a wild goose chase because they have no idea where this kid is. So if they come up with these scenarios that doesn't disrupt his livelihood or his fields, or if there is some kind of good Samaritan billionaire out there that wants to pay him for all the damage and then some, there's really no reason for him to decline this. Someone else also posited this, if it was some kind of farming accident. Let's say, because I don't know the schedule on the farm, someone could clarify this in May. Let's say he did fall in a field somewhere, dead or alive, maybe he's still alive, and a farmer runs him over with some farm equipment, killing him. Or if he's already dead, simply runs him over and freaks out and then just covers the whole thing up. Is that a possibility? Because we do have to rectify, these are a lot of searches being done. This isn't the 70s. This is 2008. There's a lot of advanced equipment. That people aren't complete morons, you would think. So why hasn't his body been found? Here's an interesting write-up from a Redditor. Whole bunch of hyphen and underscores with an A and a J. My thoughts, he was plowed over. From a perspective of someone who grew up in a similar rural area, farm equipment is huge with poor sight lines. It wasn't uncommon for us to get a dead deer caught in the corn head using during harvest, even with a corn reel. I forgot what crops were nearby, but there is decent growth by the time he went missing to hide someone who died of exposure and is just laying there. I wouldn't want anyone trampling my fields looking for some missing young adult, as the farmer likely assumed it wasn't Dyer, and he wouldn't have noticed him in his field. When harvest came around months later, the farmer running the equipment might have not noticed the decomposed body at all, especially if the ground is rocky and uneven, so he has the corn or bean head a bit higher, and the body would be all torn up and crushed by the combine running it over. Probably enough for the farmer to not notice it's a person. When he went out again to disc the fields, or he thought it was just another deer and kept on with the same result. Or he did realize it was the kid's body at harvest time and felt so bad that he denied them the search, and that he tore him all up and that he just buried him in a hole. If any above is correct, there really isn't a body to find. He could have ended up in an abandoned well or stayed in the river too, but this idea accounts for the dogs. Drunk and lost, car is stuck, walks the wrong way, steps in the river, oh expletive, drops phone, can't find it or it's dead, wanders more in the dark. Cold, wet, dies of exposure in the field, no one noticed. Farmers don't want crops trampled for nothing, decomposes all summer, gets ripped up and crushed by a combine, plowed over, done. Okay, wow, that's actually very interesting. Because if the farmer really has no idea that the kid's body is on his land, he denies the search, doesn't want his field torn up, and then there's two scenarios here. Months later, he plows over the body thinking it's either a deer or whatever, doesn't give it a second thought because it's so many months later, or he does realize it's the body and covers the whole thing up. But is it plausible the farmer didn't even know that he plowed a body and it got all torn up? I mean, that's, I don't know, again, someone with more expertise in the equipment and how much of the clothes would have been. Although if the clothes got completely shredded, he might not have put two and two together. He might have just thought it was clothes that were abandoned and then in a separate area, a dead deer or a dead animal. So he might not even have known that he plowed over a human being. That's another interesting theory. And then in that case, he would pass a brain fingerprint scan. But again, and there would be no remains to find if it was completely shredded. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much of the bone breakdown would occur in these farm machinery. But apparently, the cadaver dogs did pick up his scent on a piece of farm machinery and the general area. They did not reveal exactly which farm this was on, but that's curious because that seems to fit all the variables here, and we don't need to invoke aliens or interdimensional rifts. And if the phone is still a curious issue, though. We do have to account for the phone location. Is it possible an animal? I don't know what kind of animals are out there. Is it possible an animal would grab a phone in its mouth and possibly carry it somewhere? So let's say it fell next to the river. Is it possible it fell next to the river and then later, as the river banks got more water, it was washed into, like, if it fell on the edge of the river, that way it didn't go dead, it continued ringing for a short time, but let's say an hour or two or 5 hours later, even 10 hours later, whatever, before the searchers looked at the spot where the phone was, regardless of where it was, is it possible the phone did get carried into the river at that point and the current took it far enough to where it was never found? Or is it possible that an animal picked it up in its mouth and carried it somewhere else and the phone is somewhere? But I mean, it's a lot harder to find a tiny little phone than it is a human being, so I don't know. But this farm equipment theory is this seems to be the leading theory at the moment from everything that I'm looking at here. I mean, the only other thing that might be a possibility, apparently the dog trail did continue to a gravel road, so is it possible someone picked him up and gave him a ride off that gravel road? So if he did go into the river, then he made it out of the river, then he made it to the gravel road and someone picked him up and took him elsewhere then. I mean, that theory and the theory of being run over by farm equipment, I mean, these seem to be the only real ones that account for all the variables here. I mean, the phone issue still. Yeah, I mean, if he got picked up I mean, I don't know. The phone, yeah, I keep getting stuck with the phone. But the phone could be explained by simply falling at the very edge of the river, and then it could have rose enough to sweep the phone in, regardless of what happened after. Alright, some final points here to round out this episode, just to make sure we cover all the bases. Supposedly, again, I haven't seen this verified, supposedly all of the car doors were unlocked and open when it was found, which is kind of weird. So, some people say, oh, well, somebody stumbled upon the car and searched the car completely and then left all the doors open. I mean, that's kind of weird in the middle of nowhere. Why would somebody have done that? I mean, was that just an opportune thief who doesn't even know who Brandon Swanson is, and they just searched the car looking for valuables? I mean, was anything reported stolen from it, or if there was nothing to steal from it? I mean, that's just kind of weird. And then also, Brandon Swanson's case is on the FBI's VICAP. And again, they usually don't put cases on there unless there is foul play suspected or some kind of crime, as opposed to just missing with zero evidence of a crime. So who knows? I mean, who knows why it's on there? So, I mean, FBI VICAP itself stands for Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. And of course, Maura Murray's case was famously just added several months ago, randomly out of nowhere. So, is this related to the farm equipment theory, where there was a violent criminal, the farmer, even if it was an unknowing violent act? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense unless they have more information. So, the final theory I'm going to go over here, there's really there's no evidence for it or anything. Is it possible that Brandon Swanson was followed from one of the parties he was at? Not even necessarily by a party goer, but let's say, see, people say, oh, it's unlikely that Swanson just stumbled upon some kind of serial killer. Now, or a violent criminal in the middle of nowhere in the fields. Well, here's the thing. If there's a lot of parties going on, the semester's ending, there's a lot of parties going on, would a violent criminal and or serial killer stalk certain parties where there's a lot of people maybe looking for someone to kind of get alone, because that's certainly much more plausible than a violent serial killer just randomly wandering around the fields and bumping into Swanson. Because if there was someone following him at a pretty good distance, I mean, who knows how experienced this criminal may have been, did they stumble upon his car first and then went looking for him and found him and then something happened? Again, I think all of these avenues do need to be explored. Not necessarily that this was one of his friends or someone who knew him. Again, males are much more likely to be met with foul play at the hands of a stranger than females. But maybe it wasn't a stranger either. I mean, did they truly rule out every single individual at every single party? I don't know how thorough they did that investigation, but it didn't even necessarily have to be someone at the parties. It could have been possibly some older guy just kind of hanging around at a distance, just monitoring certain parties, and he happened to follow Swanson. Again, I am not alleging that this is true or untrue. This is Mindshock, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. I actually found one more post that's very relevant by Scriptor. I'm new to the case, but after reading, this is what I think happened. Given the missing 2 hours in the timeline and the drinking at the parties, I believe he was heavily intoxicated. He probably felt fine when he departed, but a short time later he got on the road and he fell asleep while driving and slowly came to rest at the top of the hill. This would explain the lack of damage to the car, the reason why there is a 2-hour gap between the time he left the party and the time he called his parents, and his confusion on his location. Given the 2-hour nap, he may have been successfully able to hide the fact that he was inebriated, he was underage, and may not want to admit that to his parents. His state would also explain why he would leave the gravel road. The light is believed for him to see was a singular light, not light pointing toward a small town. This alone proves he was confused and not of his faculties. From there, I believe the O expletive came from him slipping in the water. His phone was lost to the river and he continued on the other side. His scent was tracked to another road. I sadly believe he continued on and eventually died to his exposure. An open space at night can be extremely disorienting, even more if you are inebriated. I wish the family could get some closure. Of course, this person does not account for the body not being found, but in terms of the 2-hour gap, I don't know if we went over that. So apparently there's 2 hours missing from when he left the party to when he called the parents. Interesting. So where was he that whole time? Was it really just a nap? A drunk nap? Other people stated that the reason why nothing was heard on the other end of the phone, if he accidentally hit mute on the phone, or if he's bumping into a fence and he drops the phone and the phone is on the other side of the fence and he can't find it after that, so he just continues on. I mean, I don't know. But this 2-hour gap is curious. Another thing I found on the Brandon Swanson subreddit, supposedly users here have stated that there was extensive searching with metal detectors. So the phone was never found. So they specifically looked for the phone as well as Brandon. So that's something that's very, very curious. Very, very curious indeed. So that's it for now. All the Mindshock listeners out there, leave your own thoughts and theories on this very baffling case. What you believe happened, why or why not, and what the evidence tells us, what the cell phone issues tell us. If you enjoy the Mindshock podcast, want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Like and share the podcast, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcaster requests. You could also be a guest in the podcast depending on your tier. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube for access to exclusive streams and chats. And make sure you subscribe to the channel to get the latest updates on cases. This is Bruce Maguire signing off. Catch you guys next time.